Welcome to our Introduction to the Trinity series. My name is Sister Mary Magdalene. This is the third of a 12-part series dedicated to an introduction to the teaching of St. Thomas Aquinas on the Trinity. Today we will be speaking more about the eternal processions of the divine persons and potential heresies to avoid in this, and then we will turn to speak about the relations of origin. Now, if you recall from last time, Aquinas gave us a roadmap in which we were to consider, first, he says, the question of origin or procession of the divine persons, secondly, the relations of origin, thirdly, the persons themselves. And last time we talked about the first point, which is the eternal and temporal processions of the Son and Holy Spirit. So first let us review the two main Trinitarian heresies, Arianism and Sabellianism. Arianism, or some form of subordinationism, misunderstands the fact that the eternal processions of the divine persons remain within the one divine essence. Because, as St. Thomas explains, Arius understood procession in the sense of an effect proceeding from its cause, so that Arius said that the Son proceeds from the Father as his primary creature, and the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son as the creature of both. But if procession is taken in this sense, as an effect, neither the Son nor the Holy Spirit would be true God. That is, because Arius fails to understand that the eternal processions remain immanent or interior to the one divine essence, he considers the Son and the Holy Spirit to be effects outside of God. But if they are effects of God, they would simply be creatures, or subordinated to God in some way. This Trinitarian heresy of Arianism or subordinationism is really the opposite extreme of the heresy of Sabellianism or modalism, because unlike modalism, subordinationism does really distinguish the three divine persons or between them, but it does so by subordinating one or two of the persons to another, with the result that they are considered to be something less than God. In Sabellianism or modalism, the same cause, that is God, merely appears differently in different situations, such that, as Aquinas notes, Sabellius said that God the Father is called Son, in assuming flesh from the Virgin, and the Father is also called Holy Spirit in sanctifying the rational creature. In other words, Sabellius denies a real distinction between the divine persons and simply names them based on the effects we see. Sabellianism or modalism is false because in reality the Father is not the Son, and the Father and Son are not the Holy Spirit. But for Sabellius they are the same, just with different names. So again, the main problem with both Arianism and Sabellianism is that they take procession as meaning an outward act, since neither of them affirms procession as existing in God himself. They confuse the temporal processions of God, acting in the world by means of a created effect, with the eternal processions that remain within God's own Trinitarian life. But procession in God is not to be understood, says Aquinas, as a local movement, or in the manner of a cause proceeding forth to an exterior effect. Rather, a procession in God should be understood by way of an intelligible emanation. For example, the intelligible word which proceeds from the speaker, yet remains in him, like a concept or a word of the heart that remains within the mind. It is in this sense that the Catholic faith understands procession as existing in God. And this is key because we believe that God the Son proceeds from God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit proceeds from both Father and Son, while the three persons still remain one God, one divine essence. Aquinas explains that the one who proceeds receives divine existence from another, not, however, as if he were other than the divine nature. That is, the Son eternally receives his existence from the Father in an act known as generation, and the Holy Spirit eternally receives his existence from the Father and the Son in an act called common spiration. It is called common because the Father and the Son together spirate or breathe forth the Holy Spirit, without, however, the Son or Holy Spirit being in any way separate from or outside of the one divine nature. Rather, they remain eternally consubstantial, of one substance or being with the Father and with one another. So here is an analogy of what Aquinas is trying to say here. When I see an object like a tree, my mind forms an interior concept of that tree. So there's a way in which intellectually that tree is in me, although not physically, but conceptually or intellectually. And for Augustine and Aquinas, this sort of concept that I have represents, by analogy, the way that the Word, or Son of God, is eternally generated by the Father. And also, when I love someone, my heart or will goes out in a way toward the one that I love by a kind of impulse, which again, for Augustine and Aquinas, represents the way in which the Holy Spirit is breathed forth in the love that the Father and Son have for one another. Let us look more closely now at this second point regarding the relations of origin. Aquinas emphasizes that there is a certain order in these processions according to their origin, that is, their principle, or where they come from. The Word or Son has the Father as his origin or principle eternally. He says in the Gospel of John, chapter 16, verse 28, I came forth from the Father. But just as we cannot love anything without first knowing it, so also the one who proceeds by way of love, the Holy Spirit, has both the Son, who proceeds by way of intellect, and the Father, together as one principle of the Holy Spirit, who is the bond of love of the Father and Son. So Jesus says in John 15:26, when the Counselor, that is the Holy Spirit, comes, whom I shall send to you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will bear witness to me. Again, the fact that these eternal processions remain within the one divine essence, they are immanent or interior processions, explains why the three persons are still one God. Yet if they are really one God, one divine essence, one being, goodness, power, wisdom, and so on, we can ask what it is that really distinguishes them. Why are we not Sabellians after all? St. Thomas answers that what really distinguishes the persons are precisely their distinct relations to one another. These relations are not merely logical relations, but are real and substantial relations, giving us a real distinction of persons. Let us begin then with the relationship between the Father and Son. Aquinas explains that the Father is denominated or named only from paternity, that is, fatherhood, and the Son is named only from filiation, sonship. Therefore, if no real paternity or filiation, fatherhood or sonship, existed in God, it would follow that God is not really Father or Son, but only in our manner of understanding. And this is the Sabellian heresy. Let us unpack this. A relation for Aquinas properly signifies only what refers to another. I relate to someone or something. And in God, these relations of origin are really subsistent. They really subsist. because God's essence and his being are the same in reality. In other words, as the Dominican theologian Gilles Emery points out, relation does not exist in God like an accident adheres in the subject. It is the divine essence itself. It is thus subsistent, just as the divine essence is subsistent. So only the Father is the subsistent paternity of the Son, since the Son eternally proceeds from the Father. Only the Son is subsistent filiation, as the one who is eternally generated by the Father. And the Holy Spirit is the eternally spirated love of both the Father and Son for one another, such that the Holy Spirit proceeds from both the Father and Son as from one principle or origin. In a creature, there are two ways to understand the term relation. One way is to understand it properly as a relation of the creature towards something else. I have a relation to you. I am speaking with you now. A second way is to understand the nature of relation as an accident which inheres in the subject, something in me. For example, my relation to you is something which really affects me. It in some way determines me. And so a relation is what Aristotle would call an accident, like quality or quantity are also accidents in me, which determine my shape or color or size. I am white and 5 foot 4 inches tall, weighing 62 kilo. So again, a relation can mean either a relation towards something, or it can mean a relation in something, modifying it like an accident. In God, one can speak of a relation between the divine persons, their relation toward one another. Yet, one cannot properly speak of a relation as an accident in God, since God is perfectly simple and so has no accidents, having no potentiality to be other than he already is. Whereas accidents are more or less changeable. I might weigh 65 kilo tomorrow. But in God, everything we would consider an accident, including relations, are in fact identical with the God's divine essence. The relation is not in God, it is God. Thus we can say that the Father is related to the Son, and the Son to the Father, and the Father and the Son are related to the Holy Spirit, who is in turn related to them. This is the proper way of speaking of relation. And yet, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are still one God, one divine essence, because the subsistent relations which they are also identical with one divine essence itself. That is, as Aquinas states, the relation really existing in God is really the same as his essence. So to recap, there are two eternal processions, or comings forth from God, while remaining within the one divine nature, in God. The procession of the Son from the Father by way of intellect, in knowing himself, God the Father speaks the Word, who is the Son, and this act is called generation, although not a physical generation, of course, but one that is immaterial, spiritual. And the second procession is that of the Holy Spirit from the Father and the Son by way of love, known as common spiration. We will continue speaking more about the divine persons as subsistent relations next time.